Our top 20 conversation continues. And remember, this is just for what we expect these Saints players to do, not based on the past, things like that. We go 7 through 13. This list was pretty similar between you and Mike.
Yeah, no real surprises. I think where it gets hard is at the top of the order. So we're going to see how that comes out on the next one. But this is like the second movie in a trilogy. So we just kind of we're getting to the next one. There's a couple interesting things in here. Some good stuff that we get into. We are presented by PJ's Coffee, and we are coming to you from the Better Call BADEAUX podcast studio. So when you are out and about, make sure you go out and check out a PJ's. They have locations all over the city. Best coffee you can get, great pastries. And if you need legal help with any of the following: car wrecks, offshore injuries, 18-wheeler collisions, Maritime Jones Act, hurricane storm claims, you better call BADEAUX at 504-323-7777 or 985-303-7777 for your free consultation and case review. And go to Ideal Market, home of the freshest produce in the city. They do great stuff in the community and always bring the best quality food products at the best prices. They are the home of the largest variety of Hispanic and international foods you will find in the state. And Hardhide Ponchatoula Strawberry Whiskey is an 86 proof blend of aged wheat bourbon, American light whiskey, and fresh Ponchatoula strawberries. Blended in New Orleans, it is not for the thin-skinned. Look for it in your favorite stores, bars, and restaurants. And while you're out and about, go hit up Firehouse Subs on Veterans Boulevard. Great people doing great stuff for the community. All right, let's get into the show.
Continuing our top 20 Saints 2023 list. I don't think it'll get as heated as it was in the first episode.
No, it will. We have good debates still to come. I know we do.
That wasn't even heated. Me and Mike have lost episodes there. That wasn't heated. That was cordial. That was cordial.
All right. Well, there's been some tinkering of lists after the recent OTAs where Michael Thomas showed up. But we are going to get into this. Just a recap, just to update the list. I'm going to go through both of them. For Nick, starting from 20 to 14, he had Brian Brzee, JT Gray, Cesar Ruiz at 18, Alante Taylor 17, Juwan Johnson, Jamal Williams, and Marcus May at 14. For
a list
Mike,
of integrity, no tinkering, just straight through, true belief.
Mike had Bradley Roby at 20, then Cesar Ruiz, Alante Taylor, Rashid Shaheed, Marcus May, Jameis Winston, and Juwan Johnson.
A questionable list of tinkering and miscalculated decisions.
Yeah, you know.
You know how you're acting like you have no doubt on your list? I will confess to everybody watching right now, I have doubt all over this list. This list is dripping with doubt. I didn't feel comfortable with the bottom 10. I don't feel comfortable with...
I didn't feel comfortable with number 2.
I don't either. Yeah, that's what I was just about to say.
With your number 2.
There are a lot of trouble spots.
Maybe I'll tinker.
The 15 through 20 were a real problem for me. 2, 3, 4 is a problem for me. You know what, though? The section we're about to say, 13, 12, 11, I think it's the most comfortable I feel anywhere on the list.
I only starred one guy on each list. It was Jameis Winston for you, and it's somebody in your top 5. We'll get to that in the next episode. Well, let's go ahead and kick this thing off. We start at 13. Nick?
I am going Rashid Shaheed here, and we talked about this on the last episode. I just feel really good with his upside, and if I'm projecting upside for these guys across the board, it kind of comes down to, like, who do you like more between Juwan Johnson, Rashid Shaheed, Marcus May? I just feel like his ceiling is so high, and I love the way he finished the season. I love the way he progressed. He was a complete route runner, and I think he's going to get better. He's talked openly about how he did not really understand the offense last year. He was picking stuff up in the game plans going into the games. If he has grasped that better this year and he can understand how to set up routes, and I talked about this last time, sort of like how to tell a story with how you stem your routes and how you're running them and selling stuff in the first quarter so you can get away with it in the fourth quarter doing something else. If he can become an artist in that regard, I think he gets better. And I also think playing with Derek Carr, who can throw the ball down the field, Andy Dalton wasn't necessarily his strongest trait. Carr has an elite arm. I think that's going to make Rashid Shaheed so much better this year. I really, really am high on him going into the season. If he gets the opportunities, I think he's going to put up really good numbers.
And Mike did have Rashid Shaheed already on his list at 17. So let's go to your 13.
Well, I was going to say on Shaheed, I'm a little gun shy on these lists sometimes about a guy who hasn't shown it to me twice. I remember once I used to do these lists on my own before, and I remember once I think I had Sheldon Rankins way too high. I think I had him like 9th or 10th, and regretted that later. And I'm like, but I thought we were seeing him like finally break through, and then it was just going to be all, you know, and like I wonder where we would have had Paulson Adebo a year ago, and we, you know, his star has fallen. But I already regret Rashid Shaheed. I wish I had ranked him ahead of Jameis Winston, just to get the disgust off Nick's face. But you're right. Rashid Shaheed is a guy I'm super excited about this year. But there is a lot of unity on this list. Rashid Shaheed, that's now 5 players that we've both had. And my number 13, Jamal Williams, that's 6 players that we've both had now. So the lists are starting to come somewhat together. Jamal Williams is interesting because I think if we covered the Detroit Lions, I wonder if he'd be higher. He has to prove it to us now, like a new set of media covering him. But he just had, I mean, incredible year. 1,066 rushing yards, 17 touchdowns. Nobody expects that from him again. But once you do that, you're golden. I mean, I really do wonder if he re-signed with the Lions, if Lions media would be like, oh, he's top 5 or he's top 8, top 10. That's what he meant to that team last year. He's also sharing the workload with Alvin Kamara and Kendra Miller here, so I don't think he's going to have the opportunity to put those kind of numbers up. But every other year in his career when he was with Green Bay, it was more like 750 yards from scrimmage, 3 to 5 touchdowns, 25 to 39 receptions. I think he'll fall back more into that type of role with the Saints.
Do you think he has something to prove with the Saints at this point in his NFL career?
Yes, that's what he said he does. He feels like he does. That's what his whole introductory press conference was about. He feels it's a little bit of a slap in the face that he had to go out and find a new home after what he did for the Lions. And they immediately replaced him with what? David Montgomery, and they made a draft day trade for, why am I drawing a blank? But yeah, he absolutely feels like a guy who they didn't believe what they saw, so he wants to make them regret it.
Do you agree with that with Jamal Williams? And two, the only reason why I say it is because I feel like he's somebody we haven't really talked a whole lot outside of the numbers. He's somebody who has become the Cam Jordan on the offensive side of the ball as far as just his unique ability during interviews and with the anime and, you know, the screen on his helmet and things like that. What were the Saints the right landing spot for him to be able to improve and make a statement?
Well, I mean, they need to be. And I think he's going to have all the opportunity in the world. Alvin's probably going to miss a lot of games at some point this season. His trial starts, I believe, July 31st. It's the end of July. Right. So there's a good chance he's going to miss some games this season. I think he has every opportunity in the world to take advantage of that. And I think he fits what they do. Like, you look at what they were doing in the red zone last year. Like, they could not score from the 1 yard line if it wasn't Taysom Hill. And he's someone that's a specialist on that. And that was the most impressive thing about watching him after they signed him. Like, his second effort trying to get into the end zone was crazy on a handful of plays. Like, those are the plays they need. They need guys that can be bullies, and they want to run play action. They want to take these shots down the field. You need to be able to establish those types of runs to be able to do that stuff down the field. So I think he's a good fit philosophically for what they do. Will he score as many touchdowns next year? I highly doubt it. His numbers overall might take somewhat of a hit, but I think production-wise, per snap-wise, I think all that stuff is going to look really good for him.
And not screen, I meant the visor on his helmet, which has gotten a lot of attention. Shout out to our guy, Derek Hingle, who has now gone viral, right, for that picture on NOF. Be sure to check that out on all of our social media pages as he continues to put up more and more and more content. I mean, it's been pretty awesome, the advantage point or vantage point that he has that he's able to bring to fans. Yeah. Okay. I don't think you guys know this. Your 12's the same.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
At all?
That doesn't surprise me. This is where he belongs.
Yeah.
Why
do you want to do the honor?
Taysom Hill.
Taysom Hill.
Yeah. He's good.
I didn't love putting him at 12 originally.
I think he might be too low.
He might be too high. He might be too low. 12 feels too high for what he's actually done, but we both feel like he's criminally underused. I mean, we had talks at the end of last season about who the team MVP was. If you could only protect 5 players on the team, who would they be? And Taysom entered both of those discussions. It's a, you know, he only had a career high, like 575 rushing yards last year. But that's because they should be using him more. You know, he's averaged almost 5.5, 6 yards a carry last year, 5.5 yards a carry for his career. There were games we mentioned talking about him earlier this summer. Atlanta, Seattle, Cleveland, where he was the driving force behind those wins. I mean, I don't expect them to do more with him this year, especially now that they've upgraded both the running back and the quarterback positions. But until teams prove they can stop it, the Saints should be doing more with him.
He might be the only player in the NFL that is simultaneously massively overpaid and massively underrated.
Yeah.
Like it just like everything about him, nothing adds up. The way they use him doesn't add up. I would just, like I said on the last pod, like a couple pods ago, I would just make him a running back at this point. Like he averaged 5 yards per carry. They're still going to keep him in the tight end room. I feel like they're overthinking it. It's just let him do what he does best. Give him some snaps under center, hand the ball off to him, let him average 5 yards per carry and find a way to put him in advantageous situations. So I don't know, like he's not used enough, so he shouldn't be higher. But like when he is used, his per snap basis is so good that he should be higher on the list. So like, I don't know. I just was like back and forth, fine 12. Like it just kind of felt like the happy medium between the two dichotomies of his situation.
You're saying 5 yards a carry, which is a good thing. That would massively be the worst year of his career. Like, he's never averaged less than 5.3. And there's not a single pet peeve I've had more in all my years covering the Saints than when the people say when Taysom Hill gets the ball, oh, everyone knows what's coming. 5.3, 5.8, 5.3. Yeah, then stop it. Stop it.
And Nick mentions he thinks they're overthinking it. I think they're underthinking it sometimes, and I think that showed last year. It was like Pete Carmichael, you have something in your bag, use it. Like it's not a secret. Taysom Hill at this point is not a secret to the NFL. But what he's able, and I mean, it kind of doesn't help your point there with the fans. Like, why do you keep using? Because it works. Like it's a
great run game.
Yes,
like Nick said, whether you make him a running back or not, he is a very effective run game. We just talked about Jamal Williams a minute ago and how hard it is to get 1 yard carries in this league and how valuable that skill is. Here's a guy who can do it.
Yeah, when you roll Taysom out, it typically works. And I can't remember which game it was, but I think one of you guys asked this in post game, and Dennis Allen almost made it seem like, we should have used Taysom more. That can't be the mindset after a game, is that, we should have used him. No, and he needs to be more involved in the game plan. I don't know if John Gruden coming in will help that. To me, like, take the John Gruden stuff outside of it. I don't necessarily like the fact that they felt they had to bring somebody in to help Pete Carmichael, because to me, this is Pete Carmichael's year to shine and to prove that he can stand on his own, not with Sean, that he can be the true offensive coordinator and be confident in himself. And it seems like there always seems to be something like that's coming in. I get like, you always want to make yourself better as a player, coach, whatever. But at this point, take some onus as an offensive coordinator and do what you know is right. I mean, he worked under Sean for however many years and proved the one season. How many players talk to us about, well, Pete Carmichael, did it for that one season that Sean was out. Okay, well then show it to us then.
Yeah. There's a difference in optics when you are in a strong position versus a weak position. Like when Sean brought in Mike Martz, like it's different.
Yeah.
But when you're a guy that's like kind of on the hot seat that maybe should have got replaced, and then there's this guy coming in that's probably a much better coach than you, like it just hits completely different.
Yes.
It doesn't bother me from that sense that they brought in Gruden, because I really do think Gruden and Carmichael speak the same language. This like the fourth time Gruden's visited the Saints because him and Sean were good friends. The offense that was originally built with Sean and Pete Carmichael came from John Gruden's language. So Pete bringing him in and saying, you worked with this quarterback, you know the language of our offense. What does he do best in the offense? Like that doesn't bother me, but the Taysom Hill stuff bothers me. I think Taysom Hill and Alvin Kamara, who we're going to talk about later on this list, are the two biggest black marks on Pete Carmichael's resume. And there were too many times after games where Pete said, I should have used him more. I should. And that was the thing that disturbed me most. They know what they have at this point in Taysom Hill. There should be no, you know what, we should really use him more. You should have that figured out by now.
Yeah. To Brooke's point though, the thing that bothered me about the Gruden visit though is the way we were able to talk about it after. Like we shouldn't have been able to sit here and been like, well, John Gruden can show Pete how to use motion.
That's what I mean.
2023. Yeah. Like those, it should be, if he's coming in, you should have all the nuts and bolts down. And these are the things that I did well with Derek, that Derek had success with. Here are Derek's soft spots. Here are Derek's blind spots. Those things are all good. It's just the fact that we're looking at it in broad spectrum and being like, well, maybe they'll know how to do play action. And it's just like, come on, like that isn't what we should be talking about.
That shouldn't be front of mind. But to Pete Carmichael's credit, Derek Carr did talk a lot about, what went into the process of when John Gruden was here and what the purpose of it was. And Derek Carr even said he can answer questions that I can't. Like, what is Derek going to do in this situation or after this play? Or just different things like that. And so I think that, to Pete's credit, that will help. But
Absolutely.
But it's the other stuff around
Nick
it.
made a great point. Like, if that had happened a year ago, we wouldn't have batted an eye at it. But Pete Carmichael's under the microscope. There's
Absolutely.
no doubt about it.
So the next one is kind of interesting too. You guys don't have the same one at 11, but you got the same two names at 10 and 11, but flipped.
Okay. All right.
So
all right.
Mike has Eric McCoy at 11, Pete Werner at 10, and the opposite, Nick has Pete Werner at 11, Eric McCoy at 10.
The thing that pops, I thought you were gonna have McCoy way higher than me. For some reason, I thought you were gonna put him higher. But yeah, that's interesting.
That was
we
probably
kinda see him
my
in the same
easiest
place.
choice on the whole list was Eric McCoy, like where I had him. Yeah,
And
like
the reason I have them flipped, and then even at one point I had my 9 at 11, and then it just felt like the injury bug with Pete Werner is something that I feel like he has to overcome, and he has to prove that, and that he can be a healthy player. But clearly, an ascending talent. Gets all the tackles. I think he's the future of their linebacker position if he stays healthy and productive going forward. I think he's going to keep getting better and better. It's just the health factor for him. That's really my only hang up with him.
Yeah, let's start with Werner. I had him 10th. I actually, before I wrote anything down, I thought Pete Werner had a chance to sneak into my top 5 just because how good he was at a certain point last year. And then when I first wrote it out, he was 8th for me. And then I ended up moving 2 other guys ahead of him because they were only lower because of their injury history. And I was like, why should I give Pete Werner a free pass on injuries? He was also injured.
A quick interjection. Though.
Yeah.
Would Pete have gone higher if Caden Ellis hadn't happened?
If Caden Ellis,
I felt like Caden Ellis's emergence last year
too, though,
took a little of the
he took a little shine away off of how well he played. It was kind of like, damn, this other guy's really good too. Yeah.
But I also, in my mind, kind of feel like, what if you added the two together? Like if Pete was healthy all season, would the production have been the same? And what would a season look like if you add those two together? This is what Pete Werner did in 8 games. 71 tackles and 2 forced fumbles in his first 8 games last year. That's a pace of 151 tackles. I mean, what would we... Obviously, he probably couldn't keep that up all season. But for half the season, he was on pace for 151 tackles. And I know you sold me on him a lot. You were just as impressed watching the tape every week as you were watching live, and he was dropping in coverage, and he was, he just had that position on lock. So yeah, I realized ultimately I could not give him the benefit of the doubt over the other guys who have been dealing with injuries because he also dealt with injuries. That's why he's this low. But I would not be surprised at all if he's higher. I'll tell you one thing he has to do though more is game-changing plays. Not that it's his job description, but 0 career sacks and 0 career interceptions. You'd like to see a little more game-changing plays out of him before we're going to give him that boost.
Throw a curveball at you guys, and you don't have to answer too specifically because you weren't prepared for this, but ranking Eric McCoy in all centers for 2023, he's got to be up there, right?
Ballpark, I'd probably say he's probably like 10th, 11th.
I might have guessed higher than that. But he's not getting like Pro Bowl love, All Pro love yet, so he's not top 5 yet. That's for sure.
I think having a quarterback who can help with things can probably help him settle. I think Eric's best seasons came with Drew, and I think since then it's been a little bit different. And I think part of that is that. But right now I think if you're looking at it, you're ranking him. I think he's probably 10th. I'd probably say somewhere around 10th. I haven't deeply studied all the centers in the NFL, but there were some inconsistencies, but again, I don't think that's all because of him. And I think if you have a quarterback that can direct a lot, it's going to help Eric get back to just doing and reacting instead of like, it's sort of like when we do this podcast, when you're here and you're doing it, I feel more comfortable because I can just focus on the analysis. Whereas when you aren't here and I'm like playing host, like I'm thinking about the analysis plus like, okay, how do we get to the next topic? Yeah. And it's just hard to settle into one thing. And I think Eric can settle back into that with Derek Carr. So I think it's going to help him ascend his play more going forward.
The importance of him. Yeah.
We saw how much he was missed during the Pittsburgh game. I will continue to circle as just the most frustrating game I think I've ever watched, but for the Saints and Steelers, because the Saints had every opportunity to win that game, squandered almost every opportunity. Jawan Johnson had a good game. We couldn't talk about it. It was just so frustrating. And I think they were on their third backup center, I think, in that game.
That was rough.
It was rough. So you notice too, I think, the value of a player when he's not on the field.
This is all I have written down about Eric McCoy. One of them is missed when gone. At Pittsburgh last year. How about at Carolina in 2021? You remember that year? when nobody could get and the Panthers were just teeing off on them, and Eric McCoy missed that game
those double A gap blitzes. Yeah. It was unbelievable. And they just couldn't adjust to it.
His value has never been more evident than when he hasn't been there. And look, he's not going to have to call the signals anymore because Derek Carr's calling it. But that enhances his ability. I mean, the fact that he has done it and that he's done it well, he's just a guy that I feel much better for the team when he's out there. And I mean, we could actually have a good discussion about most valuable offensive lineman, not most talented. One thing we probably should have brought up when you had Brian Brzee at 20 is neither one of us had Trevor Penning on our list. Trevor Penning versus Brian Brzee, like who's which first round pick, and now Penning is going on year 2 or whatever. But Penning has a chance to be the most valuable this year. Obviously, Ryan Ramczak's been a long time, but in some ways you could make a MVP argument for Eric McCoy. One other thing, Derek Carr talked about him and his hustle. This is one thing it's hard to find stats on offensive linemen. Eric McCoy, 2 tackles last year. That's hustling. Now, one of them, he just fell on a guy who happened to intercept the ball right in front of him, but he chased the other guy down.
Yeah.
I think the thing people forget, though, is like really the value of the quarterback on these, on the offensive line. Drew made them look so good. There were times like in 18, 17, they were so injured. Like guys were driving down to Elmwood to get people out of the Home Depot lumberyard to play offensive line. And like they still weren't giving up pressures. Like they had like nobodies on the team and it just didn't matter. And we were all writing and talking and doing spots about like, wow, like they can just replace anyone on the offensive line and like it literally has no impact. And well, why is that? Yeah. Because the quarterback is the smartest person in the NFL and he's getting the ball out so quick. He's making all the right calls. I think it's going to be a huge up on him. I think calling McCoy the MVP is a stretch, but he definitely has significant value. And he's the only consistent guy on the offensive line. So right now he does have a lot of value just in terms of that aspect of it.
Well, and how good he can be if everybody else on the offensive line stays healthy. Chemistry goes into the offensive line as well. I think people probably forget that because there has been a lot of turnover with injuries on the offensive line with the Saints, but you have your starting 5 for 75% of the season. I think that is going to be a direct reflection on Eric McCoy.
Can the Saints pay like double their salary cap to have them for 75% of the season? That would make the biggest difference in the world. I mean, that's been as big of a downfall for them as anything the last couple of years.
Yep. And maybe I think that's for a later topic, but Trevor Penning, what we'll see this year, how he comes back from injury, that's somebody that I am still waiting to see. I think we all have a breakout season and, prove that he was meant to be selected where he was in the draft. All right, moving on.
I think this should be me first. You have both lists, but for obvious reasons, I think I should probably go first at number 9.
Yes, because
same position. I have Ryan Ramczyk at 9. I mean, there were several years where he was top 5 on this list, and he's actually this surprised me. He started 16 games last year. I would have guessed it was 12 or 13, but we see him missing every week in practice. We see him laboring with that knee injury for several years now, and I think we've seen him affect him on the field. He has not been he only started 10 games the year before that. He has not been the same Ryan Ramczyk the last 2 years. Before that, he was All-Pro, first or second team every year, earned the $100 million contract extension he got. Maybe they've finally taken enough wear and tear off of him that he's going to look like himself this year. Obviously, an argument can be made to make him top 5. I don't know where you have him on your list, but because injuries are clearly taking a toll on him, I have him at number 9 right now.
I think you could argue that he's maybe the most talented player on the team still.
It's possible, yeah.
I got him way higher, so we'll save it. We'll save it. Yeah.
And you're on the other side of the ball for 9, which to me, this one makes sense. Or you could have him a lot higher too. It's another one of those guys.
Yeah, I got Demario Davis at 9, and I think he's still really good. I think there's a lot of stuff that he does downhill that's great. I think his blitzing is amazing. I thought there were a couple things where it looked like maybe there was a step back last year. I think it's just a fair spot for him at this point. I actually wanted to put Werner ahead of him, and I wish I still could. Yeah, I think that there's just one guy's young and one guy's nearing the end of his career.
I don't know. If I'm picking one guy to start for me, it's Demario over Pete.
In a coverage league, I don't know if I'm going that direction in 23.
Okay.
I don't know. There was some stuff that there were some plays near the sidelines that I thought he used to get to that maybe he didn't, that I think Werner cleans up now. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we'll see it come back. Maybe everybody being comfortable in the defense is going to be, a difference with the secondary and just more healthy players. But I think Werner is arguably just pure coverage, I don't know. I think you might be ahead of him. But yeah, I still think DeMario is really, really good. And I put him here because I don't want to make that statement where I'm taking away from him at this point. And I feel like you're doing that. So until we see like a super clear step back, I'm going to give him the benefit of doubt. But it's possible if we redo this in week 17, those two guys are flipped.
No question. Look, I'll talk about DeMario later because he's not on he's on my list in the next episode. We probably just flip-flop him and Ryan Ramczyk almost. But it's clear that approaching a list like this is always hard because we're saying it's for 2023 and not what you've done. And I lean a little bit more on skins on the wall. Nick's a little more predictive, and neither one is wrong because I do agree. Pete Werner is trending up and Demario Davis is trending down, and we don't know where they're going to meet. And actually, if they had decided to re-sign Caden Ellis in free agency, we wondered if they would consider trading Demario Davis because, you got to be younger and you want your guys pointing upward. I don't know. This is what Demario Davis down looks like. Over the last 8 years. I don't know if there's a bottom drop off, but you would think at his age that it is going to happen at one time.
He's so smart that I think he'll hide it until he can't hide it anymore. Exactly. And that's what's going to happen. I think physically it's already starting to happen. And he's so smart that he's keeping it. It's sort of like with Breeze. He was fine until it was just like boof. Yeah. And then it was over overnight.
And where is DeMario's contract at right now?
He has this year and one more after this year. Next year's $10 million. So it's probably a situation if they're going to keep him, they're going to have to restructure it. But as Mike said, we had conversations about should they be a year early? If Caden's an ascending player and they actually believe in him, do you want to be a year ahead of that instead of a year late? That's something that would have been a very shrewd decision. It would have been hard to get there. In losing DeMario, it's not just an on-field thing. It's an off-field thing. It's in the locker room. It's the leadership. It's being an extension of the coaching staff. So I think there's still a lot of value there. But when you are in the business of football, sometimes you have to make those really hard decisions, and sometimes you're rewarded for them. So we'll see. Looking back at it, I'm guessing they probably wish they would have kept Trey Hendrickson at this point. That's arguably the best defensive player on a Super Bowl caliber team. And now they're going through all these defensive ends, and we're like, can this guy play? Can that guy play? So sometimes making those hard decisions and ushering people out that have been stalwarts. What's the word I'm looking for? Stalwarts?
Yeah, that works.
Stalwarts of your roster can be tough.
Stewards or stalwarts.
Yeah.
You just combine them into one word.
Pieces of your roster, letting them go sometimes can be tough, but it pays off in the long run.
Yeah, no, as we know, Ellis is on you have to call them New Orleans Falcons at this point, their defense, because of everyone they've taken. And Cam Jordan even mentioned, you didn't even find a new name for your stadium, which obviously that's not up to the Falcons, but it is kind of funny.
Yeah.
But I mean, obviously the Falcons saw how much of a package Caden Ellis is for them. I mean, that was pretty quick when that happened too.
Yeah. No, look, Caden Ellis is going to be missed. I understand why they did it. We just had Demario Davis and Pete Werner both in our top 11, and it's a position where they only play two players at once. Caden Ellis would have been a luxury, but he's going to be one that they're going to miss, and they're going to get to see him twice a year right in their faces.
So for 8, I want you to hold off.
This is going to be juicy for both of us, right?
Yep. We're going to get to you second.
Okay.
Because this is where the tinkering came in that we were talking about.
Yeah. This is where
you got Mike Thomas at 8.
Yeah, okay. So she was going to try to go in a different order.
And you have?
I got Alvin at 8.
Okay. But realistically, I think both of those, I mean, that's a pretty even. When both Alvin and Michael are playing at the top of their game, how do you... what is it that puts Alvin above?
Mike's
Michael
ceiling
Thomas
was higher.
Above?
Well, I had years where Mike was number 1 on this list.
Okay.
Alvin has never been number 1. Well, you know what? There was 1 or 2 years at the end of Drew's. I guess maybe 2021, Alvin would have been number 1 on my list. So I guess you're right. Their ceilings were pretty close.
I might have had Alvin first going into last year. Even 2020 was such a good year for him that I had it. But I think there's a scenario. Okay, so let's end game the season. Both guys are healthy, Alvin for whatever amount of games, whatever, them playing at their peak ability for that, what they can be right now. I think Mike Thomas can still be the best player on this team.
I agree. I give Mike the higher ceiling right
now.
Because
and too with volume at running back, that Christmas game that you can't have that every single Sunday, but you can have a Sunday where Michael Thomas has that volume of catches. I think it just because of their positions, you would have to give the ball to Michael Thomas, and when it comes to the leverage point.
Well, I think at their peak, I actually want to look this up, but I think their career highs yards from scrimmage might both be about 1750. Mike, that's hard for a receiver to hit 1750. Alvin was flirting with it, a couple of times in his heyday. Alvin scored way more touchdowns in his heyday. So there were years where Alvin was more effective. But I do agree with Nick. Currently, Alvin plays running back. We're seeing the age. We were just talking about it with Demario Davis. We're seeing the age with Alvin. I don't expect Alvin to go back. I think he can have a more efficient season. But I think a healthy Michael Thomas now could still be a guy who is, cruises past 1,200 yards and 100 catches and 10 touchdowns if he was fully healthy. That's the big if. That's why he was maybe the second hardest player for me to grade on this entire list, but behind Jameis Winston that we talked about in the last episode. But yeah, Mike was gone for 3 years. When I wrote my first list, I had him at 11th. And then when we saw him back on the practice field and heard him talk, I moved him up to 8th. And that's probably way too low. If you told me he's going to play 12 games this year, he's in my top 5.
Yeah.
I just don't.
We don't know.
We don't know. It's impossible to know.
I'm a believer.
That's fine. No, if we're ranking ceilings, 8 is criminally low for Michael Thomas. I admit that. Yeah.
So yeah, for me, Alvin being here, like again, I don't think you can turn back the clock. I think they can use him better. I think they can use him more effectively. All that stuff is true. But it's like the argument people make, it's like, well, Alvin out in space. Go look at Alvin's numbers out in space. They went down. He was better between the tackles last year. The thing everybody complains about is the thing that he's now been best at for 2 years in a row. I got to see it before I can think that it's going to change. And it's just not practical. Like when you have it's a running back nearing 30. It just is what it is. So I think they can get him in a better role, more advantageous role. I do think like the reemergence of the screen game would be something that's great for him. I think that maybe using him in the slot more is something that should absolutely happen. They got away from all that. Like the creativity and how Alvin was used dissipated, but I think even interjecting it back in, 2020 is over. It's not coming back. That was, I think, his peak season. And I don't think that there's going to be that. Like, I think it's just that now. And it might be slow. I think, again, smart guy. He can do a lot of stuff. All the stuff out in space with the ball in the air going, like, that's going to help. But I just don't think that we're going to see that where he has this magical reemergence. I just don't think it's a practical thing at this point.
I'll make the pro Alvin case when I have him higher on the list. I do want to give the pro Michael Thomas case, though, now. If he got back to what he was, game over. I mean, we're as we said, I think that first time he came back for OTAs, we're changing our win totals based on him. That's the kind of player he is. But what if he just comes back and he's the player he's been the last couple of years? His last 9 games, 51 catches, 587 yards, 4 touchdowns. That's an average over a 17-game season of 96, 11, 09, 8. Even the injured, in and out of the lineup, Michael Thomas is catching 9 for 105, 9 for 104. Wow. 5 for 57 and 2 touchdowns against Atlanta last year. 6 for 65, 8 for 84. These are all in his last 9 games.
And when he's not,
he just shows up and he can't help but catch 6 or 7 balls. And if he's healthy, I mean, yeah.
As I've said, he had 11 contested catches in 3 games.
Yeah.
And Chris Olave was second on the team with like 21.
Well, we all remember the catch down the field last year, week 1, Atlanta.
Yeah.
It was insane.
He was awesome in that game. And they weren't even on the same page. Like they missed on a couple throws. Like Jameis threw behind him a few times and he was still great. Mike is special. Yeah. Like Mike is a special football player. Absolutely. Yeah. No question about it.
Yep.
It's a crying shame that he hasn't stayed healthy because like we're missing out on watching really what I think could have been like maybe the best receiver. And like he was in that Randy Moss conversation. Yeah. Like he stays healthy. He is in that conversation with those type of players. Maybe not ahead of him, but if you were making your top 10 at the end of Mike's career, like he was solidified and it just disappeared because of these injuries. And I hate it. Like that's something that we all should have been able to watch more of.
You know what's surprising to me now that I think about it? It never killed his spirit either. Has he ever done an interview where he did not sound like the hungry Michael Thomas over the last 2 years? No.
I mean, he hasn't. I mean, I'm sure he must have had some.
That's impressive though. Like the mental fortitude to stay right there.
Yeah.
Like I'm still that guy. I'm still Michael Thomas. I'm still the guy from 2019. I know I'm injured, but I'm coming back and I'm going to be the same. And as he said the other day, it's going to be just like the old days of training camp. And I sure hope it is.
So do I. Yeah. I find it hard to believe that like he probably didn't have some dark days at home, but like to just get out of it and come out and still have that self-belief. Absolutely. Like it would be hard for anyone to be that confident still after everything he's been through. But He doesn't show it. So, I mean, I'm excited. Like, I cannot wait to see. Man, like, I just want to watch him play. Like, as a fan of the sport, like, I just want to watch him play. Like, I want to see what he can do. I don't want Mike's career to end as a what if.
Right.
Like, in I don't know, like, is a sucker of, like, sports stories, like the redemptive arc and all that. Like, I want to see it and have something to, like, feel good about. I don't know. It's a story that I want to see play out positively.
Totally with you.
All right, let's move to 7. And I just want to clarify where they both had Marcus May. Nick had Marcus May at 14, Mike at 16. They both have Tyrann Mathieu at 7.
Yeah, it seems right. And look, if we did this mid-season last year, I wouldn't have had Tyrann this high, but I really like what I saw at the end of the year with Tyrann. I really like everything I'm hearing from him this offseason. He feels all in. He feels energized. He's hitting the ground running with Marcus May, with the other DBs on the practice field, second year on this team and understanding it. And you know, DA said something really interesting about him at the end of last year. It wasn't showing in production a lot last year, but he said, I honestly can't think of any mental errors Tyrann has made all year. He said that, I think, in mid-December last year. And for a team that did like nothing, like they were near the bottom of the league in takeaways last year, he's the one guy who did consistently get around the ball. 3 interceptions, that's not a ton. 8 pass defenses, a forced fumble, a fumble recovery, a sack. He's a playmaker, and we've seen, obviously, much bigger numbers. First team All-Pro for the Chiefs in 19 and 20. 16 interceptions, 35 pass defenses the last 4 years. I expect to see more of the playmaking Tyrann this year too.
So ideally, presented by Ideal Market, he's heading into his 11th season. Has he hit his ceiling yet, or does he still have more to give?
I don't think he's hit his ceiling with the Saints. You know, I think we've seen probably Tyrann's best football in other places, but I think he can be better than he was last season for sure. I mean, it took him a while to settle in. He told us that he was playing new coverages last year that he didn't fully feel comfortable with. Him and Marcus May didn't get a lot of games together. Now that could hit another, a hiccup with May going to court for that DUI. Potentially he ends up missing some time this year. But I think overall, the point I made with Marcus too, like if you have Marshawn Lattimore out there as a safety, that just gives you flexibility to do so many different things. You can cheat. If you're seeing something, if you're covering the dig on cover 4 and this guy just has his guy down the field, you can jump a second sooner. You aren't waiting that extra half step. You can try to anticipate a little bit more. So I like the situation he's coming into. We saw the playmaking. He said he was going to get 6 picks this year. I don't know if you guys saw the tweet. That's a big number, but we'll see. Look, I think
he's done it before.
I think he's going to take another step in this system though. So yeah, ideally he has a better season than he did a year ago.
And look, that means more, I think, to Tyrann Mathieu than a lot of other people too, is when you trust everybody else around you and you feel freedom, this is a guy who thrives on playing with freedom. He wants to freelance. They want to let him freelance. They want him to follow his instincts. If you know you've got your corners locking things down, you trust your safety, you trust your nickel, we could see him flying all over the ball. I mean, the whole defense had to play way too tepid last year.
All right, we've got our top 6 next. Be sure to tune in to that episode. I can't wait to see it all. Try it again.
Oh, he didn't have it on the camera.
That's all right. Nick just tried to pull what show was that?
David Letterman?
There we go.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, one of several. There it is. All right. The top 6, I'm looking at it right now. We've got a lot of similar names. One that I'm questioning why it's in your top 2. We'll get into that.